So more news out of Iran today. Iran now is apparently pulling out of parts of the nuclear deal. You might recall that even though the U.S. pulled out of the nuclear deal fairly early in the Trump administration, there were many other countries that were a party to that deal, namely Iran and quite a few European states. So even though the U.S. decided not to keep up their end of the deal, Iran and the European countries never withdrew from the deal, so it was technically still in effect. But apparently the Iranian government feels that the Europeans are not keeping up their end of the deal, and so therefore the Iranians now are saying, well, we are going to no longer keep up part of our end of the deal. Specifically, they're saying now that they will not dispose of their enriched uranium, which is something that was a part of the deal, because the concern is if Iran holds on to enriched uranium, they might use it to make a bomb. And so this is their shot across the bow at the European countries, who now have 60 days to try and renegotiate with Iran to save the deal before Iran completely pulls out of the deal. So if within 60 days the European countries don't come to some kind of new deal or reform to the deal with Iran, well then Iran says now that they're going to remove their caps on the enrichment level, meaning they're going to have more enriched uranium, and they're going to modernize one of their reactors, which again, the concern with the deal originally was trying to keep that reactor from modernizing so that, again, it would be harder for them to make a bomb. Now, I'm sure that much of our esteemed Western media, such as the folks on CNN and Fox News, will spin this as some kind of an escalation on the part of Iran, considering that the U.S. is sending that carrier strike group into the Middle East, supposedly to deter Iran. But considering that this is specifically directed at the Europeans, who have been acting independently of the Trump administration with respect to Iran, I don't find this to be a direct response to Trump's actions. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that we can just take the president of Iran at his word for why they are instituting this sort of negotiating tactic at this point. Now, they claim that the reason why they're pulling out a part of the deal is because essentially they feel like they've been holding up their end of the bargain the whole time, but the European countries never have held up their end of the deal, meaning the European countries were supposed to allow Iran access to finance and banking and all these international institutions, which apparently Iran has not been granted access to. So they see, well, why are we giving up our only bargaining chip, which is these enrichment levels and disposing of our enriched uranium, when we're not even getting what we want. So I wouldn't say that this is like a red alert or anything yet, because it does seem to me like this is a sensible negotiating tactic. Despite that, however, in the context of the U.S. sending that carrier strike group to Iran, even though this is not necessarily a direct escalation, it will escalate the situation, because even though the U.S. has not responded yet to this news, I'd have to imagine that someone like John Bolton or Mike Pompeo would just be seeing red at the news that Iran is going to pull out of the nuclear deal, even though the U.S. had pulled out, a year ago. Now, if I had to imagine, the response that we're going to get from Pompeo and Bolton is going to be essentially that Iran was never complying with the deal anyway. See, they were unserious. We were right to pull out all along. This was the worst deal ever negotiated in the history of deal making. And frankly, if they're feeling especially hawkish, they could use this as casus belli for invading Iran, because they could say, see, this is proof that Iran is going to, they're starting up their nuclear program right now. They could have a bomb. I'm sure Bibi Netanyahu could come out with another one of his PowerPoints to say that, with his whole, remember his old Iran time bomb graphic that he used to use? He could come out and say that we have 30 seconds left on the timer or something, and then the U.S. could go on TV and say, see, we got to take these guys out. It's a matter of world peace. We got to take down Iran. So, of course, it's quite convenient that they are moving in those 4 B-52 bombers into the region, which were coming from, I believe, Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Those 4 bombers could mosey on over the Iranian plateau and level Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, of course, the U.S. could very well bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities and then decide that they're not going to declare a full war and invade the country, they could just say, hey, see, this was a surgical strike, we took out the threat neutralized. But of course that would be goading Iran into responding in some way so that they don't look completely feckless on the world stage. And then after that, Iran could do something else that could serve as the reason for invading. Because it might look too aggressive if the U.S. just invades Iran because they decided to pull out of a deal that the U.S. wasn't even a party to. I'm sure they will try and dream up some kind of other intelligence that could be used to bolster their case. For example, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, which is a front for the Gulf monarchies, ironically enough, considering its name, has a report out today essentially saying that Iran has been developing what is called a shock generator, and I'm not too familiar with making bombs, but apparently a shock generator is a part used in a nuclear weapon. And so according to, again, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, which is funded by monarchies, this evidence proves that Iran is building a bomb. I would not be shocked to hear that Bolton or Pompeo's statement now on Iran today is going to have something to do with this shock generator news. But again, all this has happened overnight, so I haven't heard U.S. media coming out and responding to any of this, so I'm just having to guess at what their narrative's going to be. And it'll be interesting to see how close or far off I was. But as I said yesterday, it seems like there's some kind of connection between what's going on with Iran and the U.S. and what's going on with Gaza and Israel. And again, even though we know that Hamas and Iran are somewhat allied, they are different entities, so I'm not exactly sure to what extent they're coordinating their moves together. But from what I understand, the organizers of the weekly protests at the Gaza border, which again happen every Friday, are saying now that they're not going to obey the Israeli request for maintaining a 300-meter perimeter from the border, meaning that the protesters have to stay back 300 meters from the fence, or else the Israelis are going to shoot them. So the protesters are saying that they're not going to obey that, one, and two, if the Israelis shoot even one protester, there's going to be hell to pay. So this seems to me like a confirmation that the Gaza conflict is going to heat back up this Friday. Friday is probably going to be a big day either way because not only is there going to be the Gaza protests, but also, as of today, the USS Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is set to enter the Suez Canal and make its way closer to Iran. So we should see the Lincoln arriving in the area in the next couple of days. My guess is that if anything is going to happen with the Lincoln, i.e. if it's not simply deterrence, then we're going to be hearing increased war propaganda over the next couple days, trying to get people used to the idea that the U.S. is going to go forward with some kind of action against Iran. Now, I mentioned yesterday, if you look, the thumbnail of my video, I think the title was deterrence or provocation. It may very well be that this act by Iran of pulling out of the nuclear deal and essentially saying that we're going to keep enriching uranium at levels that make it possible for us to make a bomb, this may in fact be what the U.S. was looking to provoke. This may have been what the provocation was meant to trigger. And also, of course, Mike Pompeo was just in Baghdad meeting with the Shia Prime Minister of Iraq, and we still don't know what that's about. In any case, this story is far from over, and the escalation seems to continue on every day, so I'll probably have another video out about this tomorrow, because things aren't looking good right now. We keep walking closer and closer to a real conflict, which will not end well. If you thought the Iraq War was a disaster, I shudder at the thought of what kind of a disaster a war with Iran could lead to. So if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.